Hey, hi everyone. Welcome to CodeTav Management. So, in the last lecture, we have discussed about the part 1. There we have mainly discussed about the basic Spring Boot JPA workflow, then the basic architecture, how the things are happening for our uh, how the JDBC is working, how the JDBC template is working, how the JPA came into picture. So why we still need JPA. So after that part, the thing we will discuss in this lecture actually. Okay. So JPA is not any magic, right? So behind the scenes, Spring Boot creates and wears several components that work together whenever your API hits the database. So just understand like what really happens. So to understand that, first of all, you need to see the ORM architecture, object relational mapping architecture, and that flow in the last video also I have discussed. So first your application is there, then the JPA interface, the implementation will be done via Hibernate, then the Java database connectivity. Again, the implementation of it is done via the DB driver, and then the database connection happens. So the object relational mapping acts as a bridge between the Java object and the database tables. So instead of writing SQL, we have for the tables we have the entities, for rows we have the objects, for the queries we have the method calls. So through the JPA we can achieve those things, right? So what is the simple JPA flow then? Then when we call, suppose when you call the repository dot save user, so what happens in the background? So Spring gets an entity manager. Entity is placed in persistent context. Then SQL is generated by Hibernate dialect and JDBC executes it and driver talks to DB, the DB drivers, whatever. Like for PostgreSQL, some driver is there. For the SQL, some driver is there. For H2, there is also some database driver is there. So that actually communicates with the database. So first of all, it gets the entity manager and entity placed in persistence context, right? And SQL is generated by the Hibernate dialect. And then JDBC actually executes it and driver talks to DB. That's the flow. Now the JPA core components. So first of all, for the JPA core components, we have the first part as the persistence unit. So that is actually group of related entities. So this is the logical group of entities that share mainly the database configuration, JPA provider, and dialect. Okay, database configurations, JPA provider, and dialect. Right? And next, we have the entity manager factory. So that is a factory for creating entity managers. So it created once at startup, one per persistence unit. So for each persistence unit, one entity manager factory will be there. It creates the entity manager objects and it's a heavy object. So Spring internally uses the local container entity manager factory BD. Okay. Now the next part is entity manager. So this is your main JPA engine and it is used to persist, merge, find, delete entities. And according to that, we have the multiple methods. Persist for insert, merge for update, find for select, remove for delete, create query for JPQ. Java persistence query language. So entity manager works with the persistent context. Okay. This is the persistence unit and the entity manager works with the persistence context. What is the persistence context actually? So that is the first level of cache. So what is the functionality of this persistence context? I know that is mainly the theoretical part, like the architectural part is the theoretical part. You need to understand, you need to understand some like flows actually, how the things are working in background. Okay, that's the part actually. So just think this persistent context as the first level of cache. So what it does, so it holds the managed entities. Okay, inside the entity manager, many entity objects are there. So it basically holds the managed entities, and it will track the changes. Then it will sync to DB during commit and controls the entity lifecycle. That's the functionality of persistence context. Okay, so that question can be asked actually. See, like here, entity manager is basically used to persist, merge, find, remove, create query. Okay, this entity manager is work with the is working like entity manager works with the persistent context. Then what does persistent context? Persistent context is like acts as the first level of that. Then what are the functionalities? The first functionality is like it holds managed entities. Next, it tracks the changes. Next, it syncs to the database during commit, and at last you can say it controls the entity lifecycle. Now, what are the entity states? The first state is new, then is managed, then remove. And inside of all, detached is also there. Like from new, detached can be done, then remove. Okay, that also can be done. Like from new to manage to remove, otherwise new to detached to remove. So new means not saved. Okay, managed means it is tracked by JPA. Detached means not tracked, and removed means scheduled for delete. Okay, so these are the entity states. So persistence context basically track these changes from new to managed or removed, or new to detached to remove. This whatever changes is going on, that actually checks. And here I also added the methods as well. So like see new to manage. So some persist method can be called for the inserting. So when this persist method will be called, then it will be tracked by JPA as well. Then from managed to removed, then from removed to delete or something objects or something, the clear method can be called. And whatever update will be done to the merge, again it will be managed. Okay, so that's the flow. Now the transaction manager. So what is the transaction manager? Transaction manager actually binds the entity manager with DB transactions. Okay, entity manager basically like transaction manager basically binds the entity manager with the DB transactions. Now there are two types of transaction manager. First is resource local. This is for the single DB, and second one is JTA. JTA for the multiple DB, like for the distributed one. We have the ZTA. Now the transactional matters. This like entity manager write the operations must be inside a transaction. So when without the transactional, then when you call the persist method from your entity manager, then you will get some error. Why? Entity manager write operations must be inside a transaction. So if you will not use transactional, then you will face one error. But if you will use the transactional annotations over your method, like this is your save method, right, for your user, then you are calling this entity manager dot persist. So then, if with this transactional, then the flow will be free to like no issue will be there. Like it will be like consistent. So uh, like with the transactional, whatever, like if you will face any issue, then it will be rolled back. Otherwise, it will be committed. And the detailed transactional annotations related video, I have the four parts: part one, part two, part three, part four. That also I have discussed. You can go to my playlist and see those videos. Okay. So now JPA opens the transaction, it commits, flushes the SQL. Okay. Now the next part is JPA repository and transaction. So Spring data internally annotates with transactionals if you will give or not. It always like internally it will annotate with. Then the save, delete, update, these methods can be you can work with those. The next topic is dialect. So dialect is like Hibernate basically uses the dialect to convert any JPQL to DB specific DB specific SQLs. Okay, to convert those things, actually dialect helps. That's why Hibernate uses Hibernate uses direct to convert this JPQL to DB specific SQL. So for MySQL dialect is there. For H2 dialect. For PostgreSQL dialect is there. Now for H2 console, to enable the things, we have the spring.h2 console.enabled you can set as true. And spring.h2 console path, you can set like slash h2 hyphen console. Okay. So these topics I have discussed here. Okay. Now, again, I will discuss some, like from these topics only, I will ask you some interview questions. Suppose question one, what is persistence context? So here I have discussed on it. So persistent context is working with the entity manager, and you can assume it as your first level cache. And what are the functionalities? So it holds the managed entities, then it tracks the changes and seems to DB during the commit, and it controls the entity lifecycle. Right? Next, the difference between the entity manager and entity manager factory. So here also I have discussed. So for the JPA core components, we have the persistence unit, entity manager factory, and entity manager. So entity manager factory is for creating the entity manager, and entity manager is basically used to persist, merge, find, and delete your entities. Okay. So factory creates the managers, and manager performs the CRUD operations. So you can think about the entity manager factory as a senior managers. Okay, they actually create the managers, right? Then the manager will perform the activities of any project. So that's the function. Then why is transaction? So question two I have discussed like difference between entity manager and entity manager factory. Now question three. Question three is like why is transactional annotations? So in a short, you can say the transactional annotations matters because the transactional annotation basically binds the entity manager with your DB transaction. Okay, like any JPA operations to the DB transaction. Okay, so it helps to create a bridge between your JPA operations with your DB transactions. Next is Q4 is what is the dialect. So basically, dialect actually Hibernate uses the dialect to convert the JPQL to database specific SQL. Now, suppose what is the difference between the merge and persist method? So basically, persist is like for new entity. Okay, persist is for new entity. Here you can see like on top of the new on top of this new entity, we can use the persist method. But for any detached or removed one, removed entity or some detached entity, you can say for detached entity, we use the merge method. Now, persist is basically helps to insert any something, some objects or something, and merge is basically to update. Okay, so something removed or something detached. So that update we need to give to the entity manager or something, right? So that's why we call the merge. So suppose the next question, one situation based I'm asking. Suppose what happens if transaction is missing? Hmm? So I have told you, right? So what is the function of the transaction manager? Transaction manager basically binds the entity manager with your DB transactions. So if there will be no transaction, then no entity manager with actual transaction available. Okay, actually it actually create a bridge, right? So suppose your entity manager and your DB transactions. Okay, so that binds. Who does this binds? To the transaction manager only. So if transaction manager will be not there, then entity manager will unable to bind with this DB transactions. Any so if there will be no transactions, then No entity manager will be there with actual transactions. With actual DB transaction will not happen. You will not able to find those records. It will not able to do the transactions itself. Okay. So that's all. Uh, these six questions actually I have discussed also. Like from this topic, these six questions, if you are clear about this topic, you can answer these six questions as well. And these six questions are the vital for your interview as well. Okay, so that's all. So thanks for watching. Do like, share, and subscribe. In the next lecture, again, we will discuss some new topics. Thank you, everyone.